Is the mic working?
Yep.
Okay.
It is working, Brandy? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
I can hear him.
All right, good morning and welcome to Unity of Springfield's History of Religions and New Thought Christianity adult education class on this brisk morning. And my name's John Braucher, and we're going to take a little venture into engaged Buddhism and talk a little bit about also how that relates to New Thought and just where we are at today in all the world events and such. Specifically, we're going to be talking about a book by Thich Nhat Hanh called Being Peace. It's a collection of some lectures that he did when he was traveling to the United States and lecturing. We're going to start with an American Buddhist prayer / chant that I learned at Unity Plaza at the temple, Unity Temple on the plaza. And we did it at the Art Museum up in Kansas City. What's the name of that one?
Nelson Atkins.
Nelson Atkins, and they have a lot of ancient relics, Chinese and Indian relics and stuff, and they had some very nice Buddhas, and we would sit in that space.
So you did it both at the plaza and?
Well, I learned it from folks from the plaza who
Yeah.
went to Nelson Atkins, and we on one Thursday a month we would do the chants, and it's a practice that I've just started it several years ago, just kind of folding it into my daily spiritual practice. So we would start today with that. And it's on your handouts. Is the titled as an American Buddhist prayer / chant. So if everybody just kind of get comfortable sitting as if we're going to be mindful and meditate. And you may join me if you would like. That's why I put it on the handout. In Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, we go for refuge until fully awakened. Through the power of generosity, ethics, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, and wisdom. For the sake of all beings, may we realize and demonstrate our innate goodness. In Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, we go for refuge until fully awakened. Through the power of generosity, ethics, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, and wisdom. For the sake of all beings, may we realize and demonstrate our innate goodness. In Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, we go for refuge until fully awakened. Through the power of the Holy Spirit, generosity, ethics, and patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, and wisdom. For the sake of all beings, may we realize and demonstrate our innate godliness. Lama Chenu. Lama Chenu. Lama Chenu. Gate, gate, peragate, persamgate, ulisatpa, gate, gate, peragate, persamgate, bodhisattva. Gate, gate, peragate, persamgate, bodhisattva. May the pure, brilliant sun of bodhicitta dawn in each and every heart and mind, dispelling the darkness of suffering and confusion, unstoppable, until all are illumined and awakened. May the pure, brilliant sun of bodhicitta dawn in each and every heart and mind, dispelling the darkness of suffering and confusion, unstoppably, until all are illumined and awakened. May the pure, brilliant sun of bodhicitta dawn in each and every heart and mind, dispelling the darkness of suffering and confusion, unstoppably, until all are illumined and awakened. Okay, when we did this at the art museum, the two middle sections were the chanting. We would do that for maybe 10 minutes each, and then 5 or 10 minutes of meditation in between. But this is the abbreviated form, and which I use as a daily practice to just kind of get my head in the right place in the morning. And some of what Thich Nhat Hanh gets to talking about is, and the point of why I wanted to talk about this book in particular, is, again, he talks about interbeing and about engaged Buddhism. And he also talks about that Buddhism in America or in Western Europe needs to be different than it is in the East, because everybody has different experiences and so on and so forth. And so he presents a set of precepts, 14 precepts that we'll talk about later, that to kind of consider as a path for an American Buddhism. And I consider myself, I look at Buddhism, I don't see it as a religion per se. It's more of a system of thought, a psychology even, if you will, to conquer suffering. And I think it's very consistent with Christian religion or the Christian values, and particularly in New Thought Christianity. There's just tons of overlap, and it's really fits. So it's, of course, based on Siddhartha, Prince Siddhartha, who was a wealthy Indian fellow who experienced great suffering particularly he observed great suffering. He left the palace. His father tried to keep him very sheltered. And when he left the shelter of the palace where he was raised, he saw a lot of poverty and suffering and people hurting, and he was very touched by it and felt hurt and pain and suffering in himself, and his thinking got disturbed, and he wanted to figure out a way to address suffering in the world. And so he went on a journey. He hooked up with 4 or 5 other ascetic Hindus, and where they ate very, very little, and went out into the countryside and begged for alms and meditated many hours every day in an attempt to try to seek the ultimate of peace. So meditation is very central to this. When in Thich Nhat Hanh's, now I don't know if you're familiar with Thich Nhat Hanh, I've talked about him before. He was a Vietnamese Buddhist monk who, as a teenager, when he was a teenager, Vietnam War erupted, and he brought along, became leadership in the monastery, and then he was trying to come up with some reconciliation, trying to get some peace between the two sides. So he left Vietnam and went on a tour to try to drum up some support for them to come to a peace agreement, peace accords. And both sides threatened to arrest him if he returned to Vietnam. So he sought safety in France, and so that's where he set up Plum Village.
Do you know if he grew up on the north or the south part?
He was in the south of the parallel that was determined from, which was actually determined by the French when they decided that they were not going to relinquish French Indochina after World War II. And at the time, there were a lot of countries were trying to find their independence and stuff after World War II, like India was itself.
Yeah.
And so one of his, when he goes around and teaches meditation, he really focuses on that we need to smile when we meditate. That we need to feel the positive feelings that come from the feedback we get when our face smiles. So he has this, and I wrote this on the handout, that breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I smile. Dwelling in the present moment, I know this is a wonderful moment. And that's a nice, easy, something that we can repeat when doing mindful meditation. He writes, this capacity of waking up, of being aware of what is going on in your feelings, in your body, in your perceptions, in the world, is called Buddha nature. The capacity of understanding and loving. It is with our capacity of smiling, breathing, and being peace that we can make peace. So the next chapter is the 3 gems. Buddha, the root of the word Buddha, B-H-U-D-D-H, Bud, is to awaken and understand and love. And Buddha, like Christ, like Jesus, the man, never intended to be venerated and to be a Godhead. And the Buddha is in us, just like we consider the Christ nature to be in us, in unity. And that's also the way Thich Nhat Hanh sees Buddhism and what Buddhism is. Dharma are the teachings of Siddhartha, the teachings of Buddha, and also of consequent Buddhas who have come since Siddhartha and put together writings and teachings of Buddhism. And then Sangha is the community that lives in harmony and awareness. So our Unity of Springfield is an example of a Sangha. So when I say this prayer every day, it's not of Indian Buddhism. In Buddha, I think of the Christ center that's within me. In the Dharma, I think of all the teachers that I've had over time, and teachings that I've looked at. And in fact, in the Buddha too, anybody that I look at and I go and I sense that they're awakened, then that's a Buddha. And then Sangha for me is Unity of Springfield. Sometimes it's been my workplace as well. Some groups of people of like-minded folks that have worked together to try to make positive change. I'm fortunate that I had a career where we did things to try to help others, and also at a time when having a group of people together practicing mindfulness became a part of a therapeutic approach. I felt very blessed by that. So in this book, he focuses out of the 5 aggregates, and the 5 aggregates include form, which means our body, and the 5 sense organs in the nervous system. It includes feelings, it includes perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. And in this book, he focuses on feelings and perceptions as a... Did you get a handout? And he says, there in some of the writings of a multisyllabic word, he says, there's 3 kinds. There's pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And in the practice of self-compassion, compassionate mindfulness, there's a focus on trying to make the current moment, just this moment, not changing anything that happened in the past, not trying to control the future, but just making this moment pleasant, wonderful, at peace. And to use the mind to do that. So those are the feelings, and then perceiving includes our ideas and our concepts about reality. The whole thing that it's not what happens to you, but it's how you perceive what happens to you, has so much power in terms of how we experience reality, how we experience everyday life, and how we perceive what are our choices, if any, in this everyday life, is really going to be controlled by what we believe and how we perceive what's occurring. Is it just happening to us? Or are we somewhat in the driver's seat? Is it a reflection of us? Is it a reflection of the time? There's lots of different ways to look at it. And sometimes we need to look at it deeply and look at it from different perspectives and not make an immediate judgment about what it is that we're perceiving. And which is a really strong argument for sitting and paying attention. It appears that we're doing nothing, and in fact we're really trying to do nothing. Or we're letting ourselves do nothing so that we can observe and notice and try to increase our awareness of our thoughts, our feelings, and our perception, and the different ways that we could choose to accept what is occurring in this current moment. Buddhism, especially engaged Buddhism, teaches to look at things deeply and to understand the true nature, so that we will not be misled into suffering and bad feelings. The concept of interbeing is an example of seeing deeply. Also, in meditation practice, you are the breath. Now, the interbeing, the example that he gives, or one of the examples that he gives, is that this piece of paper. Okay, so if we look at this piece of paper and we look deeply into this piece of paper, it was at one time part of a tree. And that tree wouldn't have been alive were it not for the sun and for the rain and the seed that originally started the tree. It wouldn't have become paper without a lumberjack. And these days we wouldn't have this paper if there wasn't somebody that built machines that hauled logs around. And it wouldn't be this paper had it not gone to a paper mill and then been transformed from pulp to become paper. And you can go on and on and on until really everything and everyone is connected to just this piece of paper. And you can do it with really virtually anything. This interconnectedness, this interbeing, is just if we take the time to notice it. So nobody really is, so when, like in conflict in this whole idea about being peace, or that if there's someone who we feel like we're in conflict with, or we feel that is harming us or being mean to somebody else that we want to advocate for, the person who we see as being the offender is related to us, connected to us. We're connected to them. We're a part of the violence. If we look deeply and see all the interconnections and all the causes and the possibilities, so if we lash out at them, we're lashing out at ourselves, because we're all connected. And so it leads us to need to come up with some different ways of looking at conflict and what do we do about it. So the heart of practice essentially is this chapter about meditation, interbeing, and looking at that interconnectedness. So then working for peace. And this is a Sangha-based process. So within a community, but you can take that, and it could be a faith community, but it could be a town, it could be a village, it could be a state, it could be a country, it could be an international community. He wrote a poem called "Please Call Me by My True Names." And it gets into this whole idea of perception of someone who we maybe find ourselves at odds with. Do not say that I'll depart tomorrow, because even today I still arrive. Look deeply. I arrive in every second to be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with wings still fragile, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of the flower, to be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, in order to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that are alive. I am the mayfly metamorphosing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird which, when spring comes, arrives in time to eat the mayfly. I am the frog swimming happily in the clear water of the pond, and I am the grass snake who, approaching in silence, feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks. And I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am a member of the Politburo, with plenty of powers in my hand. And I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people, dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom in all walks of life. My pain is like a river of tears, so full it fills up the 4 oceans. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and my laughs at once. please call me by my true names, so I can wake up, and so the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion. So and that's one of the precepts too, is going to be, we don't want to avoid pain. Being at peace and even being happy and smiling in meditation isn't all about pretending that there's nothing negative in the world. But it's about starting to exert some control about how we feel and how we perceive. So the reconciliation practice that they practice within Sanghas in engaged Buddhism is if there's conflict between two monks, they start with face-to-face sitting. So they actually have to get into a room and express what their concerns are directly to the other person. Not on Twitter, not in a television interview, but face to face with the other person. Remembrance is the second one, and that's about remembering how did this all come about. Because usually when there's a conflict, it didn't just happen. There's a history to it. Things happened, and then people reacted to it, and then the other person reacted to it. And so there's a chain of links of events that occurred that need to be discussed and flushed out and be made aware of. Non-stubbornness. So this is a practice of willingness. The willingness to possibly acquiesce, or the willingness to see the other person's perspective in the situation that they were in. Covering mud with straw. So covering mud with straw. Mud is the conflict, the anguish that we experience in the conflict. And covering with straw is de-escalation. It's the process, and usually you have some elders involved, along with the two people that were in conflict, who help with the de-escalation and to help with seeing the different aspects and helping the parties to calm down. Because, of course, we know that when our emotions are very heightened, our prefrontal cortex doesn't work as well. And we're not able to notice, our awareness goes down, our ability to process information is reduced. Voluntary confession. Being very honest with oneself and pointing out what part I had with creating this conflict. So each one of the individuals goes ahead and fesses up to something that they've done, because, again, there's this history that goes in. And after a while, if it's a conflict's gone on very much time, then, everybody's done things that they're not so proud of, or said things they're not so proud of. So that is that section of it. And then the final one is decision by consensus of the Sangha, and for them to accept the verdict of the Sangha. So it's kind of a blueprint for reaching peace and reconciliation within a group. And there's some overtones of what occurred in South Africa too when they did their peace and reconciliation. I don't know what they call it, but it was, they had the hearings and so on and so forth, and they allowed, in South Africa, they allowed people to not be convicted, not be charged even with crimes, when they came forth with the voluntary confession and discussed that it was so important that it was just came out, that the truth came out, and people were able to go ahead and bring this forth in an accepting environment. So then he talks about then this Thich Nhat Hanh order, which is a Vietnamese word which basically is the interbeing. That's his best way of describing what this is, but it's awakening, it's awareness, love, and interconnectedness, all kind of wrapped up in one. So his first precept, or the first precept that they had in their order, and this is the order that they started there at Plum Village. Do not be adulterous about or bound to any doctrine, theory, or ideology, even Buddhist ones. All systems of thought are guiding means. They are not absolute truth. So they're the finger pointing. It's not the finger that you want to stay focused on. You want to look at what they're pointing to, and the second comes off of the first, which is, do not think that the knowledge that you presently possess is changeless, absolute truth. Avoid being narrow-minded and bound to present views. Learn and practice non-attachment from views in order to be open to receive others' viewpoints. It's not so easy.
No.
Be ready to learn your entire life and to observe reality in yourself and in the world at all times. He tells the story about the man whose son disappeared. And he didn't know what happened to him. And so in his mind, he came to believe that his son died and no longer existed. And he lived his life as if he had lost his son, and he was in grief and great grief and sadness, and lived his life. And then a decade or so later, his son came and knocked on his door and said, "Hello, Father, I'm your son." And he goes, "No, my son is dead. You are not my son." Because my son's dead. And he could not let go of that new belief that he had in order that he could then actually receive the truth that his son was still alive. And so that's the story he tells to kind of reinforce that whole idea that it's because if we hold something to be so true, so hard, it blocks us from being able to see what really is. Do not force others, including children, by any means whatsoever to adopt your views. However, through compassionate dialogue, help others renounce fanaticism and narrowness. Now, I shorten that because I tried to get all these on one page. In the book, it's, do not force others, including children, by any means whatsoever to adopt your views, whether by authority, threat, money, propaganda, or even education. However, through compassionate dialogue, help others renounce fanaticism and narrowness. The fourth one is, do not avoid contact with suffering or close your eyes before suffering. That's also not so easy. I catch myself doing that. It's one of the reasons I don't have television coming into my house. Find ways to be with those who are that are suffering, including personal contact, visits, images, and sound. And of course, I think our cold weather shelter is a fantastic opportunity for us to learn. He also says in the non-abbreviated version, do not lose awareness of the existence of suffering in the life of the world. Find ways to be with those who are suffering by all means, including personal contact, visits, images, and sound. By such means, awaken yourself and others to the reality of the suffering in the world. The fifth precept, do not accumulate wealth while millions are hungry. Do not take as the aim of your life fame, profit, wealth, or sensual pleasure. Live life simply and share time, energy, and material resources with those who are in need. Sixth, do not maintain anger or hatred. As soon as anger and hatred arise, practice the meditation on compassion in order to deeply understand the persons who have caused anger and hatred. Learn to look at other beings with the eyes of compassion. The seventh, do not lose yourself in dispersion and in your surroundings. Learn to practice breathing in order to regain composure of body and mind, to practice mindfulness, and to develop concentration and understanding. And this one, he says, it's in the middle. This precept's in the middle. He says, you know how in Asia often they'll carry water with a long bar, and they'll have the water on either side, and you balance it on your shoulders. And he says that's where this precept is. This is the mindfulness precept. Mindfulness meditation. It's in the center because it's the most crucial practice. Because without that practice, you can't achieve any of the other precepts. The eighth is, do not utter words that can create discord and cause the community to break. Make every effort to reconcile and resolve all conflicts, however small. And I just want to say here too, on these precepts, they're not commandments. They are pointing towards, because if you go back to the first one, do not be adulterous or bound to any doctrine, theory, or ideology. These are suggestions to give us to move in a direction that he feels will help bring peace and have us experience peace. Ninth one is, do not say untruthful things for the sake of personal interest or to impress people. Do not utter words that cause division and hatred. Do not spread news that you do not know to be certain. Do not criticize or condemn things that you are not sure of. Always speak truthfully and constructively. Have the courage to speak out about situations of injustice, even when doing so may threaten your own safety. Kind of reminds me of the Four Agreements, too, the first two.
Yeah.
He has a gata, which is like this meditation practice of just having a few lines to kind of keep us focused. And this is before picking up a telephone, and I would say this is also before you get on social media. Words can travel across the thousands of miles. They are intended to build up understanding and love. Each word should be a jewel, a beautiful tapestry. The 10th, do not use the Buddhist community for personal gain or profit or transform your community into a political party. A religious community should, however, take a clear stand against oppression and injustice and should strive to change the situation without engaging in partisan conflict. The 11th, do not live with a vocation that is harmful to humans and nature. Do not invest in companies that deprive others of their chance to life. Select a vocation which helps realize your ideal of compassion. And again, these are hard to necessarily, hit the mark right off the bat, but it's there to give us a direction. Twelfth, do not kill. Do not let others kill. Find whatever means possible to protect life and to prevent war. Again, we can't stop everything, but it's the intention, it's the thought, it's the idea that we want to respect and revere. 13th, possess nothing that should belong to others. Respect the property of others, but prevent others from enriching themselves from human suffering or the suffering of other beings. And the 14th, do not mistreat your body. Learn to handle it with respect. Do not look on your body as only an instrument. Preserve vital energies, sexual, breath, and spirit for the realization of the way. Sexual expression should not happen without love and commitment. In sexual relationships, be aware of future suffering that may be caused. To preserve the happiness of others, respect the rights and commitment of others. Be fully aware of the responsibility of bringing new lives into the world. Meditate on the world into which you are bringing new beings. And that's it.
Wow. That's powerful.
Very powerful. What is the name of the book, John? Is it
Being Peace by Thich Nhat Hanh.
Can you cover that mud and straw again? I was putting that on my phone and
I missed your last week.
Sure.
got behind.
No.
Okay.
Do you have one of the handouts? But I didn't describe
You
it
were sick.
in the handout. Oh yeah, okay, that's working for me. So that's where we are. Okay, the fourth practice is covering mud with straw. You know, when you walk in the countryside after a rain, it was very muddy. If you have straw to spread over the mud, you can walk safely. One respected senior monk is appointed to represent each side of the conflict. These two monks then address the assembly, trying to say something to de-escalate the feeling in the concerned people. In a Buddhist Sangha, people respect the high monks. We call them ancestral teachers. They don't have to say very much. Whatever they say is taken very seriously by the rest of the community. One says something concerning this monk, and that what he says will cause the other monk to understand better and de-escalate his feeling, his anger, or his resistance. Then the other high monk says something to protect the other monk, saying it in a way that the first monk feels better. By doing so, they dissipate the hard feelings in the hearts of the two monks and help them to accept the verdict proposed by the community. Putting straw on mud is the dispute. Mud is the dispute. The straw is the loving kindness of the Dharma. So, any thoughts about how this can impact our practice, how it relates to unity and other new thought approaches to Christianity and having the Christ within us come forward?
Well, I was going to say this fits in perfectly with what we're doing right now, with the New Thought and World Religions classes that we're trying to expand, just from, in your, I don't know how you say it, the Thich Nhat Hanh Order, 14 Precepts. And you have written down here, I know it's not everything in the book, but do not be idolatrous about or bound to any doctrine, theory, or ideology, even Buddhist ones. And I think that's what we teach here at Unity, too, and I think that's what Charles and Myrtle were saying, too, that we're always learning, and we're always looking. We never stop educating ourselves about what God is, what truth is. And I think it's important for us not to be bound to all of these human-made games that we play, I guess. We kind of, if you look at this country, the United States, we pretty much divide ourselves into two parties, right? Maybe you could say three, maybe, independent also. And then we kind of follow along with everything that party wants us to believe in. Not always, but we tend to go that direction. And it's all fake, It's not real. And we do that in our denominations too, Right. We can break down the Christian religion into all these denominations, but it's the same thing with religion too. We break down religion into all these different, and then one religion hates another one, and we forget our humanity somewhere in there.
Right. One thing I wanted to bring up too. There's a couple of words in the prayer and in Buddhism. So, bodhicitta is the act of spiritual awakening. And the bodhisattva is somebody who becomes awakened and who doesn't just go poof and go back into the spiritual world, but chooses to hang around and educate others and teach, be a teacher. So that's what a bodhisattva is when in the words in the prayer. Yeah, I would also say that to me it's been very helpful to have some of the Buddhist ideas when practicing the non-judgmental stance, with trying to get myself out of the way when listening to someone. Whether it's in a role as a clinician at work, or just dealing with a difficult person in my life.
Any comments before we
Wrap up.
Great
wrap up?
stuff, thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Let's give John a big round of applause for.
Also, I was just real quick, he has some other books: Miracle of Mindfulness, Joyfully Together, Art of Building a Harmonious Community, and The Blooming of a Lotus.
Are those all his books?
Those are all Thich Nhat Hanh books. He's written quite a
John, do you want to read this?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Okay, in the announcements, the New Thought and World Religion class on November 20th will be a presentation on religions of the world as experienced by Dee Narman through song. Dee's background includes training as a Hindu Sufi and Baha'i, plus a strong grounding in Native American spiritual traditions. We are so happy with this number of children coming to Sunday school. Jen and Lou need assistance. So we are looking for persons who would volunteer one Sunday a month. Without additional help, it is difficult if a child needs help going to the restroom, etc. The hours would be 10:30 to 12-ish. Today is the last day to order a name tag with your name and Unity logo. Name tags are $10. Sign the list in the foyer. The Friendsgiving potluck will be November 24th at 2 p.m. Please sign up in the foyer if you are willing to help with setup or cleanup and what you will be bringing. Sunday, November 27th will be the Decking the Halls. Please plan to stay after the service to help us decorate for the holiday season. Oh, that is a blast. There will be pizza for volunteers as well. We have several openings for volunteer receptionists. Monday morning, Tuesday morning and afternoon, Thursday morning and afternoon. These shifts are for 3 hours, 10 to 1 and 1 to 4. There may be office tasks, and you are always welcome to bring a book or other entertainment. And I would say, this isn't on the announcements, but it's cold out there, and it's going to be cold out there this week, so the cold weather shelter also has some openings for a number of tasks.
Thank you.
Donation